Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very special presentation. As we're all welcoming you in, let's see who's here. Just pop in where you're from in the text box, and there's some well-known names already. Robert McGill, there's a name from the past. We haven't spoken for a good 15, 20 years, but let us know where you're from, and I'm very excited to tell you what we've got coming up very shortly. You're down in Devon. Fantastic. That's a real surprise and treat. As in fact this presentation is going to be. So how are we doing? Anybody else coming in? We'll just give it a minute or two and then we'll get going. But I'm very excited. We've got people from America. Where else? We've got people from the UK. Where else have we got people joining us from the world? United Arab Emirates. Andrea, welcome. One of our Inner Circle members. So this is fantastic. And Detroit and Nashville, one of our favorite places. So just before we went live, we were talking about how Richard and myself were hanging out in Nashville and when we first met, and our good friend Eric, good to hear from you. You're over in the warm territory, safe and sound out of the way. Switzerland, Los Angeles, Philip, nice to see you. Oh my goodness, Sherman, we're honored to have Sherman McClellan with us as well. This is very exciting. So let's give it a few more seconds for people to join us, and I'll tell you what we're going to get up to momentarily. And Calvert, lovely to see you as well, all the way from Australia. This is a real honor. And Canada, we now have Deborah from Canada as well. Who else is with us? Let us know you can all hear us as well and tell us where you're from. New Delhi, India. That's great. Fantastic. Netherlands, France. Great. All right. So we're Cape Town as well. Fantastic. So we've got a nice global presence. We've got everywhere from America, Canada, Australia, UAE, you name it. That's great. South Africa and Alabama. So, right. So let's get the show moving. Now, the background to this is really quite interesting. Obviously, we are in a global confrontation, and we've got good old Ray. Ray, welcome. Good to see you. So there is an escalation of what's going on. And Richard, myself, Bill Rudy, and a couple of others were just talking only about 10 days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. And what's been going on is that Richard has been taking a deep dive into the archives, the work of Edward Dewey, and not just Dewey, but several other people. And a lot of this stuff is not in the public domain. But Richard mentioned some incredible sort of discoveries he's been making, and he's been using AI. And also they've been discussed with the Masters Working Group. So we've got members from the Masters Working Group here, our inner circle. And that's something that you really should consider joining us about if you're very serious about this cycle's research. But they've been looking at it. Richard has made some initial, I'm going to say initial, it might be further than that. And I do not know what he's going to present. So I'm very excited. I've got my pen and paper out here. I'm not too advanced to be able to use a tablet yet. But anyway, with that in mind, I'm excited to hear what Richard has to tell us. So let me, for those of you who are not familiar, Dr. Richard Smith, CEO and Chairman of the FSC. Richard, it's great to be with you, and I'm very excited to hear what you have to tell us.
I'm very excited to share this with you and with everybody, Andy. I'm honored at all the people who have joined us today, and for good reason, right? It's an important topic, and really, it's what I'm working on in anticipation of our conference in New York, right? I think really you mentioned the AI tools, and I have been using AI very heavily. The tools, I have my issues with the AI hype cycle and the over exaggerated impact and claims, but it has really enabled me personally to do things that I could not do before. And one of them is to really go into the archives and start to unpack the work of our illustrious predecessors. Anybody who's in the foundation, and I'll cover it a little bit as we get into the talk here, but the history of the foundation is unbelievable. Just unbelievable. And the work that was done, and the further you get into the archives and you see what people did back in a time that they didn't have access to any of the tools that we have access to today, and yet they're doing this unbelievable work. that in many ways, I think still surpasses what a lot of what is being produced today. So that's really what I've been up to. This is really kind of the beginning, I would say, of a deep research program that is now possible and very complementary to the other work that I think the foundation does very well, also in markets, et cetera. So yeah, excited to share it with everybody and excited to share it with you because I know, you are a student of history and
Very much so.
and
That's
I
why I'm so
really
excited.
appreciate and I'm interested in what you think of all this.
Well, and also chip in everybody here as well, because I do not know what's coming up. I mean, I was just given a brief glimpse and it was kind of like, hey, let's put this out to everybody. Why keep it amongst ourselves? And the next thing is that you wouldn't tell me anymore because you said, if you want it to go out to everybody, you got to listen in. So that's a sure way of getting me here. So Richard, I am excited. Let's go for it. Tell us what you got to tell us.
Let's go. Well, let me just make sure I got everything in place here. So,
well, whilst you bring that up, one of the things is the Masters Working Group. We meet every couple of weeks, and I know they've had a little bit of a sneak preview, and they've also been adding to this. So I think this is very exciting. And so, Richard, you've got the first slide there.
So I'm going to just go through my slides, and as usual, I got a lot of slides. So, again, forgive me if I go fast through some of this. This is, again, a work in progress. I'm excited about it. I think it's pretty compelling. And I will be covering this in much more depth at the conference in New York. So, so the cycles of war, obviously an important topic, not just to us today because of current events, but it was an important topic to Dewey. I mean, as you look through the archives, you see this as really one of the dominant themes of his work. And I guess it shouldn't be surprising, right? He lived through World War I and World War II. And so much of what Dewey, why he did the work he did and why he started the foundation was to try to help us avoid the kind of calamities that he experienced in his lifetime. Of course, he started the foundation after trying to understand what caused the Depression. Didn't know that World War II was coming, started the foundation in 1941. So cycles of war was a very important topic to Dewey. It's a very important topic in the history of the foundation. And sorry, getting ahead of myself. So a lot of Dewey's work was based on the work of Raymond Wheeler from the University of Kansas. And he put together a massive, really insane data set of 2,500 years of collecting the battles in the history of the world and then, ranking them 1, 2, or 3 and adding them up over, going back to 600 BC. So this is Raymond Wheeler standing in front of his famous big book, which I have a picture of myself standing in front of it in New York City at last year's conference at the Baruch College Library of Technical Analysis. So this was actually something that was in the possession of the foundation for many years, and it still exists today. And that is clearly a labor of love there, right? And then here's
it's quite a stunning book, isn't it? It's just worth mentioning that book because we did go down there and spend 2 or 3 hours with Mr. Roth down there, who kindly greeted us and showed us around. And Wheeler's work is just incredible. But look, sorry, I'm interrupting you. Carry on, please.
I mean, here's Dewey with his fellow founders, the director of the Harvard College Observatory, the Yale University professor of geography, Ellsworth Huntington. He was also at the Mattamek conference with Copley Amory, who was the organizer of the Mattamek conference on cycles in wildlife biology. And you name it, the secretary of the Smithsonian, Charles Greeley Abbott, who was very interested in sunspots and solar cycles. Wesley Clare Mitchell, the founder of the National Bureau of Economic Research, one of the preeminent economic think tanks still today. The chairman for the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton, right? Einstein's home. So all of these people were seriously interested in cycles enough to be on the, founders of the Foundation for the Study of Cycles. So this is kind of serious. And this is just a couple of pages from the paper in the archives that really started me digging deeper into the archives. Dewey talking about a 54-year cycle across 35 different phenomena. Shipbuilding, wheat prices, number 3 here, international war battles. That's some of the Wheeler data, et cetera, tree rings, sunspots, British consols, bond yields, et cetera. And Dewey claimed that many of these cycles were all peaking around the same time. And this was 1917, 1971, 2025. So this started me saying, like, what is Dewey doing here? How did he do this, right? What was he working on? And that's what the capability to do this is a big part of what has really been unlocked by these new language models that we have access today that we never had access to before. And even, the agentic tools to be able to go out and find some of these historical data sources and build databases, which is what I've started to do, of these data sources to see if we can reproduce some of Dewey's results.
So, Richard, just for those who are new to this, just on that previous slide there, you say there are peaks every 54 years. Just explain what that means. Are we seeing an extreme in that activity? What are we seeing at every 54 years? Just for the people who are new. I know we've got some real hardened cycles people here.
Well, that's kind of what I'm going to get into.
Sorry.
What did he mean, right? Because one of the things that I want to talk about, Andy, or that I'm discovering, is that Dewey was really doing a different kind of cycles analysis than what most of us are doing today. And I'm going to get into that a little bit as the presentation goes along. So maybe hold that question and come back to it. So this is just a little chart of some of Wheeler's war data, 1750 to 1953. You have kind of international battles along the top and Civil War battles along the bottom, and kind of climate eras, warm, cold, warm, cold, warm, cold. So this is just the kind of work that Wheeler was doing, in the age before computers, before this could all be done by the machines, so to speak. So just really incredible efforts, Herculean efforts that were made by people like Wheeler and Dewey, who really still don't have, I think, the recognition that they deserve today. So 1964 is when Dewey put together this book here, the 17.7-year cycle in war, based on Wheeler's data, 600 BC to 1957. Okay. So this is what rigorous cycle work looked like before the age of computers. And this is really, Andy, what, I still attribute to why I'm, running the foundation today, is because I looked in the file cabinets like 15 years ago that were sitting in Palm Springs. And I said, this work looks incredible. Like, what is this doing here, right? Like this level of care and love, the thousands of pages of handwritten calculations like this. This is actually Dewey's work calculating the data that went into that very report that I just showed you. So I just thought this was amazing. He's doing the 11-year moving average here from a 23-year moving average, all on Wheeler's counts, 1920 right here, 21, 22, 23, 19, 25. These are the counts. These are the derivations, all the stuff that we do at the click of a button right now, right? But he's got to do it all by hand and check it off with the pencils. So in particular, his 17.7-year cycle, right, in war cycles, these were the peaks and that he predicted back in 1964. Okay. all based on, Wheeler's data stopped in 1957. And that's when, Dewey did his work about he published it in 1964. And if you add 17 years to the crests, 17.7 years, these are the dates that you get. And it's roughly 18 years. And when you add 18 years to 2007, Andy, we get 2025, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which also lines up with the kind of longer 54-year cycle, which he also had cresting in 2025. So these are some new data sources. I'll be talking about these in a little bit, but these are, I mentioned Wheeler's data stopped in 1957. It was actually extended to 1989 by Stephen Bush, who worked at the foundation, was one of the researchers. I think he might have even been director for a period of time. And he extended Wheeler's data to 1989. And it took him 20 hours of research for every year of data that he aggregated, which is incredible, right? So 30 years of data, 32 years, that's over 700 hours of work to add data from 1957 to 1989. But these are different data sources. These are modern data sources. I'm going to cover them briefly. But these were roughly the peaks that Dewey had predicted, plus or minus 2 years. And these are the best data sources that I could find today that gave me something analogous to what Wheeler was doing. So it's not the exact same methodology that Wheeler did, but these are some modern data sources on battle deaths by year. And, I think it's not bad, right? You can see 1971, certainly there was a peak there. I'm sure you could tell me what was happening in 1971. What was that? Vietnam, Korea?
Vietnam, there were issues in the Gulf and also Indo-Pakistan War and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. And 1989, clearly, we didn't hit the peak exactly, but definitely declining after then, right? 2007 seems kind of like a low, but maybe our wars migrated into the financial world in 2007. And he also studied an 8.5 year, half that cycle length as well, right? And you can see that kind of middle point too in the data here, and now here at 2025. Again, these were forecasted in 1964. These aren't the exact phases. We know when we do cycles analysis today, phasing does shift over time. Cycles are dynamic, but still, I thought this was pretty interesting going back to a forecast made in 1964. So does history have rhythm? Is there a clock inside human conflict? Let's dig a little deeper. So again, the foundation of this work is Wheeler's 2,500 year data set, 25, almost 2,600 years, dating back to 600 BC, up through 1989, brought current to that level by Stephen Bush, and I think with help from Richard Mogi. And he weighted each battle by severity, 1, 2, or 3, and then he just added up the numbers for each year. An incredible data set. And as far as I can tell, Andy, this was published by the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
The foundation published this data for Wheeler in not Cycles Magazine. There was actually a journal of Cycles research that is different than Cycles Magazine, that was more tailored at academics. So that was very interesting to find in the archives. Going to be digging into that some more. And here's just kind of a picture of the counts by year going back to 1989, right? Of course, you can see some trending going up, and I would, say this is more likely, higher population, but also more visibility into history, right? and World War II over here just kind of dwarfing everybody else. I had to actually put this on a log scale because if I didn't, World War II would make everything look irrelevant. And
right.
This was Dewey living through World War II here as well. So then to follow up on Dewey's and Wheeler's work, I've been digging around and I've found these other contemporary, not all of them are still current, but they're significant data sets on war and conflict. This one's called Correlates of War, and it dates back to 1823 to 2003. That's the coverage of it. So this is a data set that I've been working with. This one is the PRIO battle-related deaths, covers 1946 to 2008. You see 1971 here, right? 1953 about here. This was part of the slide that I showed earlier, where I kind of linked a couple of data sets together, this one and then this one, the UCDB Uppsala Conflict Data Project, Uppsala Conflict Data Project. I think it's in Europe somewhere.
Sweden, yeah.
Still current through 2024. So this is real data, right? Analyzed with modern methods of Fourier transforms, statistical significance through the Bartel's test, etc. So we have the Wheeler combined data back to 600 BC. We have the Correlates of War data set from 1816 to 2014. And we have the PRIO and the UCDP data sets from 1946 to 2025.
If we can go back to that UCDP, the PRIO set, what's that peak we're seeing there? Is that 2023?
And I think this is the Ukraine war, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Right. Right.
So this is a lot of work, right? To find these data sources, to get them into a database that we can work with, and to do the analysis to look for the cycles. So, back in 1964, Dewey was doing it by hand, basically kind of just folding over every 17.7 years, lining up the data points and, penciling in the cycles, right? I think the fast Fourier transform hadn't even been developed in 1964. James Vaux, also one of the most important people in the history of the foundation, developed a Fortran program not too long afterwards in 1965 to start to apply computers to cycle analysis. I mentioned Stephen Bush extending the work to 1989, and then today we have our cycle analyzer, which our predecessors would be besides themselves if they saw what we could do today, right? So let's get into the meat of what I've found so far, right? So and this gets at your question that you brought up earlier, Andy. What's Dewey doing when he's saying, they're every 54 years, there are these cycles lining up, right? So most of the time today, cycles analysis is kind of a part of technical analysis, right? Because markets are very dominant in our lives today. And there's a lot of market analysis. And we're always really looking at a single data series, right? And we want to know what the strongest cycles are in that data series, because we don't want to trade weak cycles. We want to trade the strongest cycles. And when you're analyzing markets, when you're doing technical analysis, that's exactly what you should be doing. And I think the Foundation's tools do that as well, or better than any other tools out there. At the same time, that is not what Dewey was doing. And that's what I've really found by going deeper into Dewey's work. Through this, I was able to scan this using computer vision techniques and extract all of Wheeler's data and recreate all of Dewey's analysis using these new tools, right? And so I actually have been able to recreate his work and understand better what it was he was doing. And he was really looking for, does the same rhythm appear independently across unrelated phenomena? So he wasn't looking for the strongest cycle in every single data set. He was looking across data sets to see what cycles the data sets had in common across different phenomena. That was what his signal was of, this is an important cycle. So this was one of the things that I had to adjust in my cycle analysis, is to allow for cycles that aren't, that are weaker, that might not pass the filters of the strongest cycles, but still have a statistically significant presence in the data. And then when you look at that same cycle appearing in many different data sets, right? Some highly significant, some less significant, that is what Dewey really regarded as a signal. So does that make sense? Are you following me so far, what I'm saying?
Yes, I think so. Like, just let us know in the chat there how we're doing so far. This is quite fascinating stuff. So, yeah, carry on. Tell us a bit more, Richard.
So we're going to get into, mostly focused on the conflict data here, but I have also added to my database wheat prices, sunspot activity, commodity prices, gold prices. So I have wheat back to 1259, commodities, some other foodstuffs back to 1259. I have gold and silver back into the 1600s, sunspots back to the 1700s. So this is a serious long-term database to try to get at what did Dewey see there in, for example, his 54-year cycle, right? So these are the most important cycles that I have validated so far. The 18-year cycle, which is what Dewey saw back in 1964 without computers. I still don't know. I don't quite understand why he identified that, because he didn't have the ability to push a button on a computer and see every cycle in the data. He had to test every cycle one by one. So why he settled on the 17.7, 18-year cycle, why that cycle has turned out to be so significant even across 20 different data sets is astonishing. So this is the Wheeler-War data, and these are Bartel's tests, okay? The 18-year cycle, the 29 to 35-year cycle as another one, and the 100-year cycle. And these all, which I know you've talked about before, Andy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
These are the significance levels, right? 91 to 99% in the Wheeler-War data across 2,600 years. Sunspots, 80%. Wheat prices, 97%. Commodity index prices, 89%. So these are very statistically significant results for similar cycles across totally disparate phenomena.
Incredible.
So focusing just on the conflict data in particular, the 18-year cycle that Dewey identified, 91 to 97%, okay, showed up in the Wheeler combined data at 91%, 90% in the Wheeler International War data, and 97% in the correlates of war data set, right? Independent of Dewey and Wheeler, this is a totally different data set, 97% Bartel significance for that roughly 18-year cycle in that data set. So this is real confirmation, right? This is showing.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a very good validation indeed. Now this is fantastic, and it shows that this is still working, right? That's the key point.
Still working in a data set that Dewey never looked at, Wheeler never looked at, right? So very exciting. So these were the tests, and for this, we used our cycle analyzer from the Foundation for the Study of Cycles, which I was able to call from inside of Claude to, run the data and get the stats for me. The 18-year cycle, I showed these numbers already, but the 28 to 30-year cycle, not so strong in the Wheeler combined, but very strong in the Wheeler International at 97%. This was a cycle that Richard Mogi focused on after studying the continuation of the data that Stephen Bush put together. Richard Mogi did amazing work on behalf of the foundation. This 39 to 40-year cycle showed up in the data. I haven't really explored this one yet, but 98% Bartel significance in the Wheeler combined data. And then this kind of Kondratiev linked cycle, 56 to 60 years, really showed up 94% in the correlates of war data for the 181-year data series. So these are significant, right? Real data series, real statistical significance. And these are the kind of cycle families, right, that we saw consistently across many different data sets. I have like 23, I think, long-term data series now. And these are the cycles that are showing up, weaker in some, stronger in other series, but these are the cycles that are consistently showing up, which is what Dewey regarded as signal, not noise, right? So I've talked about this a little bit already. How am I doing on time here? Pretty good.
Yeah, we're doing good. We're doing good. Yeah.
Year cycle was, across all war types. The 28 to 30 year cycle was strongest in interstate. 39 to 40 year cycle visible in the long records. These are just some things that we were able to find, that Dewey really didn't see himself necessarily. I'm really interested in this century cycle being so significant because I know you've talked about the 100-year cycle a lot yourself, Andy. And I haven't put all of this together yet. Again, this is a work in progress. I have a chart that everybody's going to want to see. It's coming up. We're going to
we're looking forward to that. That's kind of, and hopefully that will
look at, where are we at today in the
That's exactly it. So we're going to put, I'm hoping Rick is going to put all this together, bearing in mind it's work in progress. And,
yes, exactly.
But so as to where we're at right now, but yes, sorry, I'm interrupting. We're excited about that.
But I think it's really amazing work. So I think this is really just kind of a repeat, but these are the main cycle families, I would say, that I have found so far in the work. And I'm going to pull together a few of these here in just a minute. But these are the main cycles. So the kind of 16 to 20 year, the 18-year cycle. There's 28 to 30 year cycle, a 39 to 40 year cycle, 56 to 60 year cycle, and 85 to 100 years. And I think we've seen these a lot, Andy. I think you've talked about most of these at one time or another. But what I can tell you is that these are showing up consistently across a very diverse set of time series data, right? Not just stock market data, right? We know that all stocks have the stock market in common. So, what do sunspots have in common with war data and wheat prices, et cetera, right? We're still teasing that out, but these are the major
that's great.
Family groups. So just any comments on this from your perspective?
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually, just so you must have read my mind. The 85 to 100 year cycle with the analysis you're doing.
Yeah.
Have you looked? Did you say you've looked at 2,500 years worth of data on that? So we've looked at 25 cycles. So we've got a good degree of validation there, then, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Right.
And
so I mean, the real proof
sunspot data and other data sets as well, the wheat data.
Right, but are we specific? So we're applying this across a whole series of phenomena, not just wars here. We're looking at other bits and pieces, right? Yeah, okay, that's great. So now I understand this is work in progress and you're up to this point now. And in fairness, we did say, come on, put this out there. And, it's kind of like, if we're going to put this out there, I'm not going to tell you all right now. You can come and turn up. So I know this is going to be focused to a conclusion, or not a conclusion, but a significant point at the conference in May. But before we talk about that, what are you seeing so far putting all this together? Do you have any sort of predictions you're capable of, or you're coming, any conclusions you're coming to, or am I jumping ahead? Is that the chart at the end?
That is the chart coming up here. But I think before we get to that chart, I think we just wanted to tell everybody about the conference and encourage all of our wonderful members and attendees here today to join us at the conference, because this is very important work, right? This is the kind of work that the foundation was organized to do, right? I am literally drawing this work out of the archives of the foundation. This is what brought the secretary of the Smithsonian and the chief economist in the Hoover administration and the head of the Harvard Observatory and Yale Geology and the Princeton Institute for Advanced Study together in 1941 to study this. And we have the opportunity today to do incredible work that even they weren't able to do, and to bring some of their work back to life, which I think the world is more ready to really come to terms with today than they were back in 1941, when, of course, we had World War II. But we also had this kind of incredible focus just on, mechanism and, sheer power, right? The atom bomb and and today, everybody knows those technologies are incredibly important, but we're also starting to look beyond just kind of the linear progress to what are the things that are going to, really help us survive, for another 2,500 years, right? So
right.
Some of that is what we really want to get into at the conference. That's why I'm doing all this work. But besides that, we just have an incredible event planned for everybody. And why don't you tell everybody a little bit about it, Andy?
Okay. You want me to do that? So before I tell you about that, first of all, there are a few really great questions in the Q&A. Just to let you know, we're going to come to those a little bit later on. So we're not ignoring you, but I want to keep Richard in the flow. But equally, let's just talk about the Cycles in the City event, 28th May to 30th of May. It's 3 days. And we're going to see some great names. So here we go. We've got Michael Howell here, who has looked at the 65-year global liquidity cycle. Larry Williams needs no introduction, and Larry was amazing. He came along last year. We spent a lot of time. We had a lot of fun. He gave some superb presentations. And, one of the things that hit me, I've been a student of Larry's for over 30 years, but one thing that really hit me about Larry is how present he is and how committed he is to continuing this research. Then we've got John Bollinger. Well, many of you would know him for his, the Bollinger Bands, not the champagne, obviously. But what I didn't know was that he's done a whole series of research on cycles, and he's going to present what he's going to call My History Cycle. So I'm pretty interested in hearing about that. Then Larry, together with our dear friend Jake Bernstein, they're going to be hosting a special lunch as well. And again, Jake, here we go. Yeah, Jake and Larry together. Well, I don't know what to say how many, we're at the 100-year cycle there of research between the pair of them. But what I will say was that last year we were in Midtown in New York. It was fantastic. It was a very intimate atmosphere with direct exposure to some of the greatest names in the industry. It was a lot of fun. We even had Peter Borish, who's Paul Tudor Jones's business partner and portfolio manager, turn up.
He's going to be there again this year too, Andy.
Oh, he's turning up. Fantastic. Yep. But why does a big name like Peter Borish turn up? Well, because Peter put a lot of his success down. He was the data man working with Paul Tudor Jones, and he got a lot of his data. So Richard is talking about the 1,200 the wheat prices from 1259. Gann found those. The foundation got those, and so on. But it was a lot of fun. We're going to be looking at taking that to the next level. A lot more fun this year, and of course. Those of you hanging out with Bill Rooney and I will be going to the Irish bar as well. But that's neither here nor there. But so come along, and there is an early bird special. That's your the where you can find out more. I think we've got a few seats left at the early bird. It's less than $1,000, which for 3 days is incredibly good value. There is the option to attend some other bits and pieces as well, including the dinner. The dinner was fabulous last year. We went to Smith & Wollensky. We were in the same room that Warren Buffett invites the people who write out incredibly large checks. Somebody wrote out 17 million just for a seat in that room. You don't have to do that. And that is something there. But seriously, what was really great was the fact that we had some, they were all fantastic lectures. We had cocktail parties in between. We had lunch. There is so much more going on. So you get to meet everybody there. So I had a blast last year. It was a lot of fun. And of course, seeing people coming from all over the world, and many people, customers or clients or students of the foundation, my own people as well that I'd never met, and I'd been communicating with some people up to 30 years, more than that, actually, one gentleman. So it was great to be there. So, look, I'm quite enthusiastic. I know I'm not quite. I'm very enthusiastic about this. So come and join us because it's going to be fun. Now, Richard, sorry, I got a little bit carried away. Cycles.org, NYC. As I say, it's less than $1,000 at the moment. For 3 days, you're not going to get anything. You can't do anything else for that amount anywhere else. So It's great. It is going up soon. And you have to understand that's pretty much at cost price, because we're doing this because we want to get this information out here. You know, Richard's passionate. We're all passionate. You know, we got the foundation going again. Richard has really been the thrust of it, and it's very exciting. So, Richard,
right.
we have the Q&A. We'll come back to that. We want to see this chart. Put all this stuff together. What does it really mean?
Where are we now? So this is the best chart I have been able to put together so far, using the most significant 3 cycle families and looking at their current phases based on using our cycle analyzer and looking at these long-term data series and getting their current phasings, okay? And this is the 16-year, right now it's about a 16-year cycle. Sometimes, cycles lengthen and shorten and their phases change. But again, this is using our most current cycles analysis methods and getting the phasing from the most recent versions of these longer term cycles. So this is a 16-year cycle, which is the 17.7 years, currently running at about 16 years. The 26 to 30-year cycle currently running at about 26 years. And then the 54 to 60-year cycle stretching out a little bit right now at 63 years. And what's particularly interesting to me is that when you put these all on the chart, they're all, other than 16-year, which is just about bottoming here, all rising together here into, the next 5 to 10 years. So again, this is preliminary work, but it kind of feels right to me. I don't know about you, Andy, but
where are you seeing that bottom? Are we seeing that 2027, 2028?
27, 28 there. Yep. And
right.
then,
Well,
with support from the longer 26 and 60-year cycles.
Right.
And if you look back to, the analysis Dewey did in 1964, right, that was forecasting a peak in 2025.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot to say about this, but we want to present your work today. I always have a lot to say.
All right. Well, we can have questions and Q&A afterwards, but really this is kind of the climax of my presentation of what I've done so far, which is to basically gather these 20 plus really long-term data series, gather some new conflict data series, because Wheeler stopped in 57, even though Bush extended it to 89, and analyze those and validate them against, the historic series that the foundation has identified, and put them all together to say, what are the families of cycles that are consistently showing up? And then given those families of cycles, what's happening with those cycles today? That's really what I've been doing from like 5 a.m. till 10 p.m. for the past month. So, and I think it's important to note, at least it's my view, that cycles are not destiny. I think Dewey saw this, and I believe it too, that an awareness of cycles helps us to navigate current events with a knowledge of history, right? To me, they describe conditions, not necessarily absolute outcomes. I believe that we have agency within the history of cycles, and knowing where we are in a cycle, right? What forces are elevated, and leaders, investors, communities who understand this can act differently than those who don't. And I think that's the real value of this work. And I'm so appreciative of our predecessors who, went to the lengths that they did to understand this. And I think we have such an incredible opportunity to bring their work back to life and back to the public again today. So, we didn't confirm a cycle, we discovered a structure. The cycles don't care whether we're ready, they run regardless. The question is whether we're paying attention. So this isn't about, the stock market is going to turn on X date, right? This is about looking at a lot of different phenomena, looking for cycles, families of cycles that are manifesting across those phenomena, and then tuning them up with modern tools to kind of see what the tendencies are that are unfolding, that we're living in the midst of today. And I think, going back to this cycle, that we are in a tendency towards conflict, right? We've got I'm sure you could reel off all the current events that are going on right now, Andy, between, Ukraine still going on out there, right? Now we've got war in the Middle East. There's constant talk about Taiwan. And we see the polarization, throughout our politics and throughout the world. Nobody's kind of, in between anymore. Everybody's pushed out to the extremes. And I don't see that, and the cycles don't see that abating really over the next 10 years.
Okay.
So that's really it. Some of the things that I'm pursuing, before the conference. So how, can I do something that like what Stephen Bush did? Hopefully it won't take me 20 hours for every year from 1989 to 2025. Right. But can we, make a truly, 600 BC to 2025 data set? More about how these cycles are aligning with different long-term data sets, commodities, markets, solar, et cetera. And then there's this very interesting other data set, the Shishevsky, right? The Russian researcher, Alexander Shishevsky, who has a 2,400-year human excitability database. So it's mentioned in the archives many times. I haven't actually gotten my hands on the data yet. I don't know if that data is in there, but that would be very interesting to look at, in comparison to Wheeler's data as well.
Fantastic.
So that's it, really, Andy. I hope everybody will join us in New York City to make new history. I think you remember this is the Wheeler book here. This is me in the library there at Baruch College, looking at the very same book that Wheeler himself put together. And of course, it's May 20th, 30th, 2026, and cycles.org/New York City.
Okay.
So that's it. We can come back and look at some of these slides if you want to, Andy, but what do you think?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of Q&A. There's some really excellent questions, so we need to do those. So what I hear you saying is that you've set, you've put everything together. It's set a kind of nice backdrop to everything. And really, it's about projecting that ahead. And it is telling what we're seeing. I guess one of the questions is, what was it projecting further to the right? Do you have that slide? Can we see where those cycles are topping? Are you able to show us that?
Sure.
And if not, of course, that's something we can present there at the conference. And then I would, there we go. Does that move further right?
We're about 2035 right now, as far as the projection goes out, right?
Right.
So, I'd say in, before 2040, if that's any comfort.
I will just put, I don't want to, this is your work here. It's outstanding. I will just add to this that some of my work is showing that we will be in the 90-year cycle from the outbreak of the Second World War from 1939. That'll be in 2029. That runs through, if that 90-year cycle takes place, runs through to 2034, 35. So that is correlating with that. So that means there's more war stuff to come from what we're seeing. I want to keep the focus on your work there. There's a whole series of questions. Let me just start off. I'm going to start off with one of the latter questions whilst I scroll back up. But Johnny D is asking, are you saying the stock market topped in 2025 and will bottom in 2027, 28? So the reason I want you to, so if you could explain the overlays that you've created there and perhaps how we can relate them to the stock market cycles, because I think that's something that people do want to know about. And then I'll get the rest of the questions ready right here.
The foundation's models have identified a top in the stock market that's about now, and I think we're comfortable that that is something that people should be taking seriously. And that is, of course, the 41-month cycle. And so if you take half a 41-month cycle, it's roughly 20-22 months. So a bottom would be sometime in 2027, 2028 is what the current foundation models show.
Okay.
That certainly aligns with the conflict escalating that we're all experiencing right now. So we'll see. I think you have to be vigilant and you have to keep an eye on things besides just the cycles, right? The cycles, again, I think are giving us conditions, not necessarily certainties.
Okay.
And it's a condition that we have to be very attentive to right now. And I think, what it means to me is if you can't suffer a 50% drawdown, that would hopefully recover in the next 10 years, then you need to be scaling back your exposure.
Okay. Can Dr. Smith quickly elaborate on how he scanned the physical data and got it scanned into digital format using AI? So it does say quickly elaborate. And I
was able to take the PDFs and send them to OpenAI's API server and have them scanned with computer vision techniques, and then using the language models to kind of fill in gaps in the standard OCR, and then bring those back as markdown files. And then once it's in markdown, these LLMs do an incredible job of being able to turn that markdown into pretty much whatever you want. So markdown is basically a way to format text. It's kind of a fancy text formatting. So I basically used Codex to call the OpenAI API, read the PDFs, return them page by page to me. And then I've built an editor that allows me to kind of go through the output from the AI models and compare it against the original PDF and say, yeah, this looks good, or I need a little correction here. And slowly I'm building essentially a markdown version of Cycles archives. But that also has been reviewed and known to be accurate, right? It's very important because this is serious work. You can't have tables that are corrupted because they didn't get read right or dates got shifted around. It's got to be right. So it is a very painstaking process even today. And that's how I'm doing it.
Okay, thank you. Then this is a little bit more specific. Do you have any additional cycle data on the current timing of wheat with regards to the severe drought areas showing up this year, especially around Oklahoma? Do you have anything there? I know there is some stuff in the archives about some specific areas and the prairies and so on.
I'm sorry, I don't have that today. It is an interesting topic. And I think as we get more into the Wheeler data, and because he was very focused on climate, right?
He was very much so, yeah, absolutely.
And it's something that we can talk about more on Cycles TV, but I really don't have anything to offer on it today. But if you do tune into Cycles TV, I think I'll be able to do a show tomorrow. Maybe you can ask me then.
Okay, that's great. And can you comment on the idea? So similar. Can you comment on the idea that it seems that sunspots affect food and food affects wars? What do you think to that one?
Yeah, I do think that. Well, look, we don't know really what causes cycles. It is striking that you see similar cycles appearing across different phenomena, including sunspots, food, and wars. So it's very natural to think, what's the connection between these things? And I think it's a legitimate question to ask. I think also today, there's a lot more acceptance of the idea of how like solar radiation interacts with the Earth's geomagnetic field, and that biological organisms, whether they be, wheat stalks or human beings or birds, are subject to those magnetic influences on our biology. So absolutely, we're understanding more. And this is something that, Charles Greeley Abbott, the Secretary of the Smithsonian, back in 1941, when he was doing all his work and when he decided it was important enough to be on the board of the foundation. I mean, isn't that incredible? The head of the Smithsonian, the head of the Yale Geology Department, the Harvard Observatory, and the Princeton Institute of Advanced Study, all wanting to be on the board of directors of the Foundation for the Study of Cycles. So we are starting to see and understand what the mechanisms could be that would, give more validity to the intuitions and kind of the behavioral phenomena that they saw in the data, right? So I do think, sunspots, the Earth's magnetic field, crops, food supplies, right? War, they are all interconnected, and I'm not surprised to see similar cycles manifesting in all of them. More work to be done, but I think it's a plausible explanation.
Okay. There's I'll just read this one out because I think it's an interesting one. I would like to see if there is a correlation of the 17.7-year cycle to the business cycle or Michael Howard's liquidity cycle. That one, when you mentioned that 17.7, for me, that's the 36-year cycle, which is exactly what's triggered the Iran war and so on. But if you'd like to address that.
17.7 is what Dewey measured back in 1964, right? So it obviously is close to 18, and 2 times 18 is 36. And 6.5 is, about 1/3 of 18, a little more than 1/3. So I do think that things come in 2s and 3s, and particularly 3s. So I do think that the 6.5 year, it's not 65, it's 6.5 year liquidity cycle that Michael Howell has, I think, very convincingly demonstrated, because he put together his forecast in 2000 and nailed, the recent top and bottom of the last liquidity cycle in like 2020 and 2023 into a top today of that liquidity cycle. And we've certainly seen liquidity becoming an issue, as that's been declining. So I think Michael Howell is doing really interesting, compelling work. And yes, I think that 6 years being 1/3 of 18 years is part of one of the major cycles that we see over and over again, right? If you think about even Neil Howe's fourth turning generational work, that's roughly 18 to 20 years for a generation. Of course, the 18.6-year real estate cycle, right? The lunar nodal cycle, all of those things showing up again and again. So yeah, I think there's a connection there.
Okay. So will there be a possibility to buy a ticket for online participation? Well, at the moment, we are planning to do this live. Obviously, we're in a dynamic situation with what's going on in the world. We'll keep you posted on that. But thanks for asking, because I know other people have asked that as well.
Yeah, and let me just say, Andy, to me,
it's about being there, isn't it? It's about being there.
It is about being there, because really this is about advancing the work of cycle, and that work is done by people who want to do the work, who are inspired to do the work, right? And when you get together in person, you get more inspiration than you do if you are passively watching online. So, you were there last year. You felt the energy in the room and how many people felt like, oh my gosh, this is like my tribe, right? I heard that so many times of people saying like, where have you been all my life? And that was really palpable. And that was a real validation for me, that having this, 100 people only, with 20 of those people are going to be the speakers, so, it's like a 4 in the audience to 1 speaker ratio of people who really want to share their work, who are coming on their own nickel, more or less, because this is so important to them. So that's the nature of this conference. This is not a live streamed event. Yes, if you are a member of the Masters Working Group, you got access to the recordings from last year, and we'll probably do that again. But the focus is on being in person, and I can really attest to it is a remarkable experience to be there in person with so many people who love this field.
Yeah, I love the conversations between events and at dinner and so on. We're always great, and breakfast. So moving on, let's have a look. Somebody says, Mr. 100, didn't know about the 90-year cycle, just the 84-year cycle that repeats. So I think this is a really important point. All the work that Richard's just presented here is the idea of this is a backdrop. And whatever we do in the world of cycles, we stack these things and we overlay them. And that's how we, by overlaying macro cycles with trends and so on. So some of them are what we call trigger cycles. That's when we get an event, to the day and so on. But they're stacked up against the background of where Richardson is, the initial stages of research. There's obviously a lot more work in progress, which you're going to present here. Any Fourier transform plots, cross correlation plots, right? This is your ballpark there, Richard. A quick answer to that.
You saw the chart of the phases of the current cycles, right? Those are all based on Fourier transforms. I don't have more charts of them right now, but that is basically how this cycle analysis was done, the Fourier transforms with the Bartel's significance test. Now, we have developed new significance tests, right? We have the stability score now, and we have the spectral rank score, and we've been leaning on those more heavily for, I think, kind of technical analysis application of cycle studies, where you're really looking for, what are the strongest cycles in each data series. But I think the Bartel's test still has relevance for when you're trying to do this other approach to cycles analysis, which is really like what cycles are manifesting across many different data series at an acceptable level of statistical significance.
Fantastic. Great. Well, I think, just one last thing, a couple of people asking
about more, and, I don't want to keep people too long, and I do hope that
let's just, we just hit the hour. Real estate, any quick comments and correlations in that, or is that work in progress? Maybe that's work in progress.
I think it is a good series to bring in. Maybe you can help me with this one, Andy. I don't have a real estate data set that goes back very far. So if anybody does know what the kind of canonical long-term real estate data set is, I'd be very interested in that. Certainly, we see the 18-year cycle. Well, we know that Phil Anderson and Akhil Patel have been predicting 2026 as the top of the cycle. And that was something, I've been, that kept me bullish through 24 and 25 for sure. And I think that, I'll just say that as a homeowner and landowner myself, I'm uncomfortable.
Okay, well, with that in mind, thank you so much, Richard, for sharing your work. Remember, so folks, if you joined us late, this was all as a result of a conversation about 10, 12 days ago where we were having a little chat, and it was kind of like, I've just discovered this stuff. I said, well, share it. And it's like, hang on a minute. We should put it out to everybody. That's why we call this at short notice. So this is work in progress. I think Richard's going to have something pretty solid to give you all at the conference. So we look forward to seeing you there. Come and join us, and perhaps we can just put the link up there at the conference. Let us know your thoughts if you want more of this sort of information, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.
Got all the dizzying graphics there, but I did want cycles.org/NYC. Please join us at the conference, and I really will be unpacking much more than I've already delivered today. And it is just incredible what these tools have enabled us to do. And I plan to integrate them a lot at the conference itself. We started to touch on that last year, but I think we're going to do it even more this year. So really excited about this. Thank you so much, Andy. Thanks for the
thank you, Richard. No, thank you. You're the person who's been doing all the work. So it's very excited. Thank you for presenting this stuff. We agree it's work in progress. Keep up the great work, and we'll see you all in New York. And of course, we'll see you before anyway. Right. Thank you again, Richard. We'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Cycles matter because they show us the future. Nothing else shows us a future path. Nothing that I've ever found in over 60 years of doing this.
Foundation is bigger than markets, right? It started out bigger than markets. It's still bigger than markets. It's bigger than us.
There is no such thing as a black swan. It is merely a cycle that was not forecast or anticipated.
To me, it's huge. If I can get a glimpse of the future, just a little bit of the future, I'm way ahead.
I think that the Foundation for the Study of Cycles has a role to play in both bringing technology to the world, but also really emphasizing agency and human agency.